Welcome to Gamecock Pod Live.
For the next 3 to 4 years, I'll be committed to the University of South Carolina.
This is Rodgers again to the 25, 20, 15, 10. Rodgers scores! Jackie Bradley Jr. delivered for the Gamecocks. Lost it up, looking for Kelly. Touchdown! Can you believe it?
And South Carolina is sending shockwaves through the SEC.
Frederick plays it in at the buzzer. That's a win! Unbelievable! I don't believe it!
And now, live from Studio 54 of the Gamecock Pod Studios, here's the Cockfather himself, Keith Alsep.
All right, everybody, welcome into Gamecock Pod Live for Wednesday, August the 30th. College football is in the air. Week 0 was last Saturday. A lot of good games, a lot of games that went down to the wire outside of Notre Dame and Navy. And week 1 kicks off tomorrow night. Very excited about that. But first, I want to send out my heartfelt thoughts and prayers to everyone that is in the path of this hurricane that has swept through Florida, Georgia, up the South Carolina coast. All the folks in the low country, all the folks in the panhandle of Florida, South Georgia. Valdosta was really getting pounded this morning. A lot of rains and flooding, even in Atlanta. So let's keep all those folks in our thoughts and prayers. Sometimes there are a lot bigger things than college football. I checked in with my uncle who lives in Warner Robins, and they were getting wind and rain, but a lot of people in North Florida and South Georgia are going to be without power. A lot of people are going to lose everything they've got. And so let's keep all those folks in our thoughts and prayers for sure. All right, let's get to our Nana's Porch news, notes, and headlines brought to you by Nana's Porch, the award-winning full-service catering company servicing the greater Charlotte, North Carolina area. Whether it is a banquet, a corporate event, a wedding, a big backyard bash with the whole hog barbecue, Nana's Porch has got you covered. You want to bring in a food trailer, maybe for a fall event. Nana's Porch voted among the top 3 food trailers by a local newspaper poll in the Charlotte area. Check them out at nanasporch.com, NANASPORCH. And a big shout out to my good friend Chris Payne, who is the owner-operator of Nana's Porch. Their pimento cheese, as we all know, was voted number 1 by the North Carolina Specialty Foods Association in the meat and cheese category. This year, last week, they won both first and second place. Both flavors of pimento cheese, which I have tried, and they're both delicious. The smoky jalapeno pimento cheese voted number 1, and this is different from your normal jalapeno pimento cheese because they smoke the jalapenos. They don't just cut them up and put them in there. It kind of takes a little bit of the sting out and adds a little flavor. So give that a try. That was voted number 1 by the North Carolina Specialty Foods Association. And then their regular flavored pimento cheese voted number 2. So congratulations to Nana's Porch and my good friend Chris Payne. All right, so yesterday the NFL, it was cut down day. Some good news and bad news for the Gamecocks. As expected, draft picks Cam Smith and Zach Pickens, they both made their rosters. Cam Smith selected by the Miami Dolphins. I think he may be in the starting lineup on opening day for them. Zach Pickens made it with the Chicago Bears. Kind of a shock. Darius Rush, who was the 3rd player off the draft board, he was cut by the Indianapolis Colts as kind of a head scratcher, but I've been checking on social media, and basically every fan base out there is screaming for their team, whether it's New England, Pittsburgh, Tampa Bay, Kansas City, fan bases all over the NFL screaming for their team to claim Darius Rush. And so I will not be shocked in the least if he is not picked up on waivers. And if not, I could certainly see Indianapolis bringing him back on the practice squad. Some good news for other Gamecocks. Javon Gwynn, who was a 7th-round pick by the Atlanta Falcons, he made the roster. He may be their backup center, and he can play guard as well. And then you had undrafted free agents. Jalen Brooks, so happy for this young man. He made the Dallas Cowboys 53-man roster at wide receiver. He'll probably play a lot of special teams. That's, one of the benefits of having a guy like Pete Limbo. That probably helped Jalen Brooks make the Cowboys roster. And then, no real surprise to me, a lot of guys in the NFL, it's not where you get drafted or it's more what team drafts you and how can you fit. Nate Adkins, no shock to me that he was on the 53-man roster for Sean Payton and the Denver Broncos. He can play tight end. He can play fullback. He can play H-back. He's going to be a core special teams player. And so I'm so happy for Nate Adkins. And, a lot like Patrick DeMarco, I think he's a guy that could go on and have a great career in the NFL because he's tough, he's physical, he's got ball skills, he can play multiple positions, and he can be a core special teams player. It's just all about getting the right opportunity in the right system. So very excited for him. And really, you hate to say it, but Captain Dumbass wasted the first 10 games of the season for him. He, quite frankly, would have been much more productive than Austin Stogner for South Carolina last year. Even for Trey Kenyon, who I thought was good, he just, had a lot of injuries. Nate Adkins probably should have been tight end 1 the entire season because he damn sure wasn't playing Jaheim Bell, right? He talk about it every week. Jaheim Bell, we got to get him 10 touches. We got to get him on the field. Well, then you'd go to the game and Jaheim Bell wouldn't even get 10 plays in a game. He'd get, 3 or 4 plays in the first half and 3 or 4 plays in the second half until they had to put him at running back. So very excited about the season, very excited for Dowell Loggins, and very proud for Jalen Brooks and Nate Atkins, Javon Gwynn, all great representatives of the university. Jalen Brooks went through so much, had football taken away from him at one point, and Cam Smith, Zach Pickens, all those guys, great representatives of the university, and excited for their opportunities to showcase their skills in the National Football League. Everybody go ahead and jump in the Nana's Porch chat box. We'll be getting to all your questions and comments. We've already got some people in there. On the bad news, the Panthers did cut a pair of Gamecock wide receivers, and Rashai Smith, it will not surprise me to see him get picked up. Hopefully Josh Vann will get back on a practice squad. A lot of times teams will cut down and then they will add back on the practice squad. And so the Panthers yesterday cutting Shi Smith and Josh Vann. All right, some women's basketball recruiting. Before we get into a couple of notes with the coordinators and then our in-depth interview on the Tar Heels with Ben Breiner, formerly of GoGamecocks.com. Ben was one of the first guys when I took over the show in 2019 that agreed to come on the show. I just hit him up, hit Mike Uva up, hit up Hale McGranahan. Never had met those guys. They all agreed to come on the show and are still great guests. And we're going to have all of them on the show. Ben will join in just a few minutes. Tomorrow we will have Hale McGranahan breaking down the game and talking a little recruiting, as both teams will probably have prospects in the stands and on the sidelines in the pregame for this contest. And on Friday, we're scheduled to have Mike Uva, a two-time Emmy winner, now at GamecockCentral.com. So ESPN just revised their rankings. Yesterday it was announced South Carolina made the Final Four, along with North Carolina, Louisville, and somebody else. I didn't write it down. For Adele Tack, who is a 6'5" post player from Grand Prairie High School in Grand Prairie, Texas. She's one of the true post players in the class. She's ranked number 24 by ESPN, ranked as high as number 6 by ProspectsNation.com. Sarah Strong, now the number 1 player according to ESPN. I still think it's Joyce Edwards. I don't understand what happened there. And so Adele Tack will visit South Carolina. The Gamecocks, I think, have an excellent opportunity to add her. Other prospects the Gamecocks are on in the revised ESPN rankings. I'm just going to give you the ESPN rankings for today. Of course, Camden's Joyce Edwards is really the best player in this class and in the country. Kennedy Smith, a 6-foot wing from California, now up to number 6. Justice Carlton, a 6'2" forward from Texas, coming in at number 7. Jordan Lee up to number 8. She's a 6'1" wing player from California. Maddie McDaniel, South Carolina point guard commitment, comes in at number 12. And then Adele Tack at number 24, number 6 by Prospects Nation. So very excited about that. We'll have notes from the coordinators after our interview with Ben Breiner. But yesterday I'll put this in the much ado about nothing category. Shane Beamer called his team out. They didn't have a great practice. Okay. It's not unusual when you go through a physical summer and then a grueling, grinding training camp. Fall training camp is a grind. Okay. You're going to have a couple of off days because you're just going to be drained mentally and physically. And so he called out the team. He got asked about it 3 or 4 times. I think he was sending a message. Dowell Loggins today said it was an average day, but they had a much better day in practice today in preparation for North Carolina. This is not like the last 2 openers. Shane Beamer said it. This is not like playing, Illinois State or Eastern Illinois State, whoever it was 2 years ago, and then Georgia State last year, or maybe it's just Eastern Illinois. You're playing a top 20 team with one of the top 2 or 3 quarterbacks in the country with a high-powered offense and a very talented defense, and you're facing a Hall of Fame coach in Mack Brown. And this is a revenge game for North Carolina because South Carolina took them out behind the woodshed the last time they played, right? 38-21 Gamecocks rushed for over 200 yards. Kevin Harris just wore them down. DeCarrion Joyner had the game of his life. They caught North Carolina completely off guard. That's not going to be the case. Jay Bateman's no longer the defensive coordinator. Gene Chizik is, okay? He was Mack Brown's defensive coordinator when they won the national championship. It's his second year. They are going to be improved. They returned their top 4 tacklers on defense, both their inside linebackers, one of their safeties, and then their nickel in DeAndre Boykins. And they got a lot of talented guys that had 4 and 5 stars beside their name on their defensive front that are veteran players now. And so Shane Beamer called his team out and got their attention. They bounced back today. And I was glad to see Dowell Loggins talk about that. But when you go through that grind, let's face it, you heard the players talk about this was the most taxing, most physical summer they've had under Luke Day. Then you get a weekend off, and then you go into fall training camp, okay, with a new offensive coordinator and with a defensive coordinator who's kind of on the hot seat a little bit, particularly when it comes to stopping the run, okay, and you're going to play a lot of young players. It's been a grind. And when you finally get through training camp and you come back in and you're going against a scout team for the first time, you're putting in the game plan for really the first time. It's game week. You're excited about that. You kind of, I guess they just looked ahead a little bit, weren't mentally as sharp as Shane Beamer would like, and he called them out. And he definitely got their attention because they bounced back and had a much better day in practice today. One note from Clayton White, he said Mo Kaba is back healthy and considers him a starter. I don't know if that means he'll roll out with Stone Blanton or if it will be Debo Williams, but I think South Carolina's got 4 starting quality linebackers in Stone Blanton, Debo Williams, Mo Kaba, and Pup Howard. And it's going to be incumbent upon those guys as well as the defensive front who may be without, JT Gear to start the season. I have heard good things about Drew Tuizama. I would expect him to get in there. I'd expect Tonka Hemingway to play a little at defensive end as well. So we'll have more notes after our interview with Ben Breiner. All right, so today we're proud to welcome in a new sponsor Gamecock Pod Live now, powered by MyBookie.ag, the exclusive online betting partner of Gamecock Pod Live. Football is back, and so is winning season at MyBookie.ag. NFL, college football, they've got a brand new cash out system that gives you options to bet and win all season long. If the first two legs of your parlay hit, cash out early. Use those funds on another bet or let it ride at a chance to get a bigger payday. I've already got my parlay picks in. Okay, you can use early cash outs as a tool to stay in control of the action at mybookie.ag. So to get started, go to mybookie.ag now, register for an online free account. When you're ready to make your first deposit, just use the promo code Gamecocks50 to grab a welcome bonus on the house. That's promo code Gamecocks50 to claim your deposit bonus and for a limited time, a free chip to use in the MyBookie casino. You can bet anything, anywhere, anytime, only with MyBookie.ag, the exclusive online sports betting partner of Gamecock Pod Live. I've got my parlay picks already in. I've got Utah -4 against Florida, Minnesota -7 hosting Nebraska. I'm taking the Gamecocks +2.5 against North Carolina. I'm taking LSU -2.5 against Florida State, and I'm taking Clemson -12.5 against the Dukies. That game on Monday. The games kick off on Thursday. And so we'll be back with Ben Breiner right after this commercial message.
If you enjoy listening and watching the free Wednesday show, now live streaming on YouTube, and would love more Gamecock Pod daily, join our growing Gamecock family by becoming a monthly or annual subscriber. You'll be able to listen to the show every day of the week and listen to guests like J.C. Sherbert, Hale McGranahan, and John Whittle from thebigspur.com, Colin Taylor and Mike Uva from Gamecock Central, Emily Adams from the Greenville News, Ben Portnoy, Michael Lanana, and Jeremiah Holloway from GoGamecocks.com, Michael W. Bratton, the host of That SEC podcast, and many, many more. As a VIP subscriber, you can join or listen to the weekly live Zoom call with up to 100 of your favorite Gamecocks and friends. After the show is an unrecorded overtime segment where the real scoop gets dropped and discussed. It's like going down to your local pub or sports bar and having a conversation with your Gamecock friends about last week's football game, men's and women's basketball games, and Gamecock baseball. And of course, there's always recruiting to discuss. In addition to the weekly Zoom call, VIP subscribers get the most popular podcast, The Morning After, which is released every Sunday morning during football season, and more VIP perks are in the works. Follow Keith on Twitter @KAllset, or follow the show on Twitter @GamecockPod. Go to the top of the homepage and follow the link. If all else fails, go to patreon.com/GamecockPodDaily. Join now and get up to 3 months free off an annual VIP subscription. You will love it, guaranteed. Now, back to Gamecock Pod Live.
All right, great news. Darius Rush already picked up by the Kansas City Chiefs. All right, let's go to my interview with Ben Breiner, formerly of Go Gamecocks, now at thebigspur.com. And we are back on Gamecock Pod Live, and we welcome back into the program Prime Ben Breiner, the original Ben from Go Gamecocks, now at thebigspur.com, breaking it all down on video with analytical commentary. Ben, college football, oh, how we've missed her. She's finally back. How are you, my friend?
I am good. There was something that made me feel just so alive about watching the exciting end to a Hawaii Vanderbilt game at about 1 a.m. on a week 0 Saturday. Surprisingly good game, and just being like, oh yeah, that's the stuff. I desperately want to go to sleep, but also it definitely is the stuff.
I mean, there were some really close games on week 0. I mean, it was really nice to, not be treated other than the Notre Dame Navy game. Most every, game, obviously Jackson State, they boat raced the Fighting Buddy Pews, the final edition. But the FBS games were very, very competitive. I mean, I thought Vandy, they were up 35-14 and kind of took the foot off the gas. Hawaii scored a couple of late scores and made it interesting. Kind of like North Carolina and Appalachian State last year.
Yeah.
That one, it just kept going and going and going, 63-61. And so Shane Beamer spoke to the media yesterday. He was not pleased. He sent a message to his team, I thought very purposeful, very public, that they need to have a better week of practice. Says Juice Wells is playing, compared him to Roy Hobbs from The Natural.
Isn't Roy Hobbs on one leg in The Natural?
No, so he had gotten shot early in his career by a woman with a silver bullet, and it was in his side. They couldn't remove it, and so then Kim Basinger's character poisoned him at the behest of the owner of the ball club, and it put him in the hospital. And of course, he miraculously comes out and is bleeding because the silver bullet is eaten through the lining in his chest. And of course, he hits the home run and breaks all the lights. And they win. And then he and Glenn Close and their son live happily ever after out on the farm.
I'm starting to be worried about what happened to Juice Wells after this story. Poison shot.
I don't think Juice got any of those things, but I do think there is an undisclosed lower body issue that I think there's a lot of gamesmanship going on. Personally, I think it's a bonus if Juice Wells plays and has a productive game. Like, the last couple of years when Josh Vann was pretty good, when he was injured, they'd still roll him out there just as a decoy, to try to get other players open. I mean, as we sit here on Wednesday, what are your thoughts on the Juice Wells conundrum?
I mean, I think if he's playable, you got to go with him. But I kind of leave it up as a question of, as you said, what kind of gamesmanship is it? I always find very weird the gamesmanship of person who isn't going to play saying they're going to play. It must be profoundly annoying to coaches because they do it to each other. And clearly, like, if it wasn't that important, they would stop doing it. Personally, I think a much better fib is you say a guy isn't going to play and then he does. That feels like real gamesmanship to me. But I mean, the problem is without him, like, he really does encapsulate a lot of the like ceiling of the playmakers group they have. Like, they have a lot of guys, and I think a lot of these guys can be pretty good. But like, if you're talking about a guy that you feel really good about relying on, Juice Wells is like far and away number one on that category. I'm underselling Josh Simon and Trey Knox a little bit, but among the receivers and running backs, at least, you know, Juice is that dude. And, you know, I think going into what could end up being a shootout, I would want him if he is physically available. And if he's not, you know, you go with who you got.
So I'm excited to see Amarian Brown be unleashed, because I think in the minutia of the former guys' offense, it was all about personnel groupings and formations and 100 and something plays every week until the Tennessee game. But he had this guy for 25 games, okay? A guy that broke Calvin Johnson, a.k.a. Megatron's freshman touchdown reception record at North Carolina. Or I'm sorry, at Georgia Tech.
Mm-hmm.
And in 25 games, Captain Dumbass could not scheme him open for a single touchdown, even though he is the fastest player that may be on the field, at least over the first 50 to 60 meters, because I think after that, clearly it's Nicholas Harbor. But I'm not even sure he's going to play because of the upper body injury he sustained. Of course, Shane Beamer said they're going to play, but we've heard it plenty of times. They're going to play. Then Saturday they don't play, and then he's asked about it in the post game. They had a setback on Thursday, just didn't, feel right, etc.
Yeah, I would agree that I'm pretty excited to see what Amarian Brown can do. I think he's got that ability, and I think, I think he could. I think he can be a fun guy to watch. I'll be interested to see how he can negotiate some size stuff. If everything lines up the way you would expect it to, which, doesn't happen on most plays, but if it does, he'd be going against former Gamecocks recruiting target. I can't remember what Boykin's first name is.
DeAndre Boykins.
Yes, DeAndre. His brother was Derek. I almost said Derek. But yeah, DeAndre Boykin he's a pretty good ball player right there. So that could be an interesting matchup to watch in terms of can Amarian Brown shake open. I mean, I think, I'll be honest, having watched a bunch of their film from last year, I think he's probably the strongest returner in that secondary. That might be slightly faint praise because wasn't a very good secondary. But yeah, I'm interested to see what Brown can do. What Brown can do for you, as they used to say.
So obviously, all new additions in the tight end room. I'm kind of expecting to see a lot of 12 personnel if Juice Wells is not on the field. And even if he is on the field, Trey Knox and Joshua Simon seem to be walking mismatches, I think, against a North Carolina secondary that, outside of Boykins and one other safety, they just have very little returning experience in the secondary. A lot of those guys left, a lot of them transfer portaled. And I mean, they weren't that good to begin with. They gave up over 31 points per game against a schedule that wasn't all that swift. I mean, Appalachian State did light them up for 61 points last year.
Well, I'm interested in some of the gamesmanship looking at this depth chart, because we are in depth chart season. God bless it. And they got a couple of transfers who I sort of figured both those guys would end up stepping into that starting lineup. It turns out the Virginia Tech transfer, who I thought was pretty good statistically, he's listed as a backup. The ETSU transfer they got, he's listed as a starter. And then across the way is a kid who started the last 2 games last year, who actually had some of the slightly better numbers in terms of that secondary, which, as we said, was a hot mess. So I'm going to be interested to see how that set of corners sort of shakes out. Like, that group's been a problem for the past few years for them, and I don't know quite how to read that. I don't think it'll be that good of a group, but maybe the transfers matter. I'm still confused at this Virginia Tech guy being listed second, because I want to say he had pretty good numbers.
So obviously, with any discussion on North Carolina, you have to start on offense with Drake May. He was their leading passer and their leading rusher. He rushed for over 900 yards. Unlike in the NFL, in college football, when a quarterback gets sacked, that's minus yards rushing. So his net yards rushing, not as impressive because of the sacks. But this is a big athletic guy that when he gets it going on the ground, it seems like that's when he just really gets his juices flowing and gets in the flow of the game and is a much more accurate passer.
Yeah, I'm going to be interested to watch how he functions in this new offense they've installed, because I don't want to sound like a hater, but I'm gonna. I watched I watched way more UNC film from last year than I should have. And more I came away from it, the more I kind of thought, is this guy in some ways a product of that offense? And I don't mean to say like he's a bad player. He's a good player. But there was a lot less consistency than I expected. There was a lot of – that offense generates an unbelievable number of open dudes. And Phil Longo is not walking through that door. So I am very, very interested just to see like – and it's not even like – I remember going back to Deshaun Watson from Clemson. Deshaun Watson could have these spates of being a little inconsistent. He would sort of miss open passes, and then he would put a 40-yarder on an absolute dime, and the corner would sort of turn around and shrug because it was so perfect. And Drake May doesn't totally have that. So I'm going to be really interested to see how that is because, and you know, this could just be me expecting too much, but I watched this film and I was like, I thought I'd be more impressed. Now, granted, he's had another offseason. He's a good player. He's a very good player. But there's a part of me that kind of looks at that and wonders if there might be a little bit more in the way of growing pains than a lot of people expect out the gate for him.
So Phil Longo, more of an air raid concept kind of guy. Now Chip Lindsey, more from the Gus Malzahn, which could be like early Bo Nix.
RPOs, a lot of RPOs, a lot of
quarterback run,
QB run. There was actually a moment I felt very in tune and empathetic with one Shane Beamer, because he was talking about the film prep where he was like, yeah, we watched some Troy and some UCF and some, I might have said Tulane. He said somewhere else. And all I could think was, I hear you, brother. I hear you. Because I had to try to figure out something about Chip Lindsey's offense. And it's difficult because he had the Troy run, but, you know, he was okay with someone else's players and then bad with his own players. And then he went to work with Gus again. And, you know, Gus doesn't exactly take a back seat in play calling. That's not what Gus Malzahn likes to do. So I would not have liked to be the GA trying to break down this film, because they probably just dumped a bucket full of it in front of those kids as soon as spring ball ended and said, all right, start looking.
So conversely, on the other side, there is zero college film of Dowell Loggins in college football. This will be the first time he has called a college offense. You know, I'm of the belief, right? Like generally, college coaches, they go to the NFL, they struggle. NFL guys come to college, they usually do really well. And so if you're North Carolina, how much Arkansas film are you watching versus how much Chicago Bears or Cleveland Browns or Tennessee Titans? I mean, I think both defenses are going to be filling out both offenses early on. I think the big key for South Carolina, though, is particularly if Tez Walker is not available, is you've got to stop the run. North Carolina's best players, other than Drake May, who was their leading rusher, they still have three really good running backs. Their tight ends are okay. Their wide receivers, kind of pedestrian. I mean, some of these guys, J.J. Jones from Myrtle Beach, he was a 4-star guy that Brian McClendon didn't like, which probably tells me he's really good. Guys that Brian McClendon passed on, like Joshua Downs and Jalen Hyatt, turned out to be pretty good in college.
I forgot they passed on Downs. Yeah, that's I'll be interested. I'm going to be interested in watching that receiver room feel its way out, because, you know, looking at outside of Tez Walker, they added a Georgia Tech transfer who I think is pretty good. J.J. Jones, as you said, he could be a quality guy. Just looking across kind of the rest of their depth chart, Kobe Paysour was okay for them. A little weird that I thought Nate McCollum would have jumped him. Gavin Blackwell and Andre Green, I don't even know if they've made that much noise in my preview article. So, yeah, it'll be interesting because, again, their receiver room is a little like their defense. Some interesting transfers, a lot of stars, not much in the way of being proven.
So defensively, North Carolina, or let's just stick with offense, because I think most people think this is going to be kind of a shootout. Yesterday, Shane Beamer, I thought Phil Kornblut asked one of the best questions of the press conference. You know, that basically Drake May gets about 90% of the conversation in this matchup. Spencer Rattler not getting a lot of preseason love for the most part. And you could tell that kind of irked Shane Beamer.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, by all accounts, Rattler has been really dialed in. I think South Carolina, I would give North Carolina the edge at running back, clearly. I mean, you don't know what you've got because Takarian Joyner's never played a game at running back, although he has been a running quarterback most of his entire life. Juju McDowell, to me, is just not big enough to sustain second team the entire season unless you're just, motioning him out of the backfield and getting him the ball in space. North Carolina, like I said, they have, British Brooks. He broke off that long run in the bowl game. And 2 years ago, last year, it was Elijah Green who was their leading rusher. Amari and Hampton, all of these guys, South Carolina recruited Green and Hampton. But the playmakers at tight end, Xavier Legette, Amari and Brown, Juice Wells, if he's healthy, Spencer Rattler. I think South Carolina has the firepower to really, put points up on the board, particularly in tempo against a Gene Chizik defense that just was not very good a year ago.
No, they were not. Before I talk about that defense, I'm going to say, again, having watched modest amount of video on all these guys, I like that Hampton kid. That Hampton kid is big and he runs tough. If I was South Carolina staff, I would be most worried about him. I think Green is good, but not necessarily. He didn't have that many pop plays. I would compare him to some of those South Carolina backfields they've had in recent years where they have a lot of solid players, but maybe not that many that make your eyes go wide. Green feels a little like that, whereas Hampton, this isn't exactly an apt comparison, but those moments when Brandon Wilds really was rocking. Hampton reminds me a little of that, where you're just like, oh, this guy. I don't know why this guy didn't get more carries. That guy can ball. But yeah, that defense I'm going to be very interested to see, just because it's been such a weird transition for that group where, Mac Brown's staff comes in with Jay Bateman. They were actually, for a Larry Fedora recruited squad, they were pretty solid that first year. They were a little below average, but not terrible. They were acceptable. And then, it got worse that second year. That third year when, Takarian Joyner and why am I blanking on the grad assistant who became a quarterback?
Colonel Zebuliah Nolan.
Yes. Zebulon and Joyner absolutely eviscerated that defense. And last year, first it's notable that this entire defense is basically the defense the Will Muschamp staff dreamed of building, because, man, in writing about this team, the number of kids that I have had to be a target that Will Muschamp staff desperately wanted but did not land. And they just ain't it. They at least last year, they got pushed around. Their ability to take angles coming out of the secondary was just brutal. They didn't win a lot. I guess I would call the point of attack of a tackle, that moment when either an offensive player gets stopped or they fall ahead for 3 yards. UNC gives up a lot of those fall ahead for 3 yards type plays. And I don't, if South Carolina is moving, is in sync, is playing close to where they're capable of, it's going to be a long day. Now, of course, we've also seen games where South Carolina has picked up a shotgun and aimed at its own toes. So, you can never rule those things out. But I keep looking at it and I keep being there's a lot of space there for the taking unless Gene Chizik has worked a miracle.
I mean, they are very talented up front. Desmond Evans, a former 5-star player, he was injured much of last year, did not play after October. He was a 5-star guy. He starts at their defensive end. Jacoby Cowan is another guy that Will Muschamp and staff recruited, 6'4" and a quarter, 280. Tamari Fox, 6'3", 300 at the nose tackle. They recruited Travis Shaw. I think he's out of Greensboro, and Clemson thought they were going to get him. He was a 5-star guy most of the process, 6'5" and a quarter, 335. Miles Murphy was a silent commitment to South Carolina. He had filmed a commitment video to South Carolina. Was in the group text. His mom was telling the staff he was coming to South Carolina, and then he announced for North Carolina. He's a senior, 6'4" and a half, 310. Javari Ritzie is a big kid, I think, from right outside Winston-Salem, 6'5", 295. Kedrick Bingley Jones, the notorious KBJ, 6'4", 305. South Carolina heavily recruited all of these guys.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a couple more guys that were big-time recruits that I guess have moved on. Or maybe one of them I do think might have gone to Clemson. And then you've got at the Jack, Jabron Harvey, 6'2" and a half, 240, who's a guy Shane Beamer's staff recruited that picked North Carolina. And so there's a bunch of stars.
I should say this.
Beside these guys' names.
I should say this. The Rucker kid, their starting Jack, I don't know how to pronounce that name, Kanian. That kid is 6'1". He is not a big human, and he is easily the best player on that line. That kid has problem ability. Like that's going to be one of your guys to watch. Like he isn't the most consistent, which, is kind of par for the course for everyone on this UNC team. But he, if someone's going to make life difficult on Spencer Rattler, number 25 is probably your guy. And he was like an impossibly low rated recruit, like outside the top 1,200.
Yeah. I mean, he's kind of like a Keir Thomas,
Mm-hmm.
Aaron Sterling type guy, undersized, listed 6'1" and a half, which probably means he's, 5'11" and a half or 6 feet. They list him 265. Very disruptive. He is the starting Jack. And that will be a guy. South Carolina is starting new offensive tackles. We still don't know. We just know there's an or beside guys' names. I mean, they've started. We'll get to that when we talk about South Carolina. But, I mean, I'm with you. I mean, does Miles Murphy make a big jump? Is Kevin Hester or Tamari Fox? Does Travis Shaw show up? Does Desmond Evans, a 5-star, are they able to get anything out of these guys? Or is it going to be the same old thing, which is we just don't really care a whole lot about playing defense at North Carolina?
It's weird. It's been weird to watch because, Texas wasn't always unbelievable at defense, but, outside of the Manny Diaz mess, they usually weren't horrendous. And this run of defense at North Carolina has been so bad, and especially because, as we've kind of said, it's not for lack of athletes. It's not for lack of quality physical ability, but they're just not – the toughness just isn't there. There's just a lot of people getting trucked, a lot of people taking bad angles and not following up, and it's weird to watch, especially going through a pair of defensive coordinators. Like, Gene Chizik, for all his faults, is not a bad defensive coach. He's pretty decent historically. Jay Bateman's solid, I guess. But this group just has not been it. And, if they're not it again, I think South Carolina fans could be pretty happy come the end of the weekend. Because, this South Carolina defense, I like that secondary a lot. I think that linebacking group's pretty good considering you're listing your two most talented players as second teamers. D-line isn't totally rounded out, but I think it's pretty solid.
So North Carolina, they do return their 4 leading tacklers. Okay, their 2 inside linebackers. Mm-hmm. Cedric Gray was their leading tackler, 6'2.5", 235. Power Eccles, he's got to be on the all-name team.
It's a really good name.
Power Eccles, that is. My college roommate's name was Patrick Eccles Campbell. We called him Eccles.
But that should have gone by Power.
That was not his last name. But Power Eccles. And so those guys are back. Mac Brown says he thinks Cedric Gray can be as good as anybody in the country. He was a guy that was 203 pounds. He was a hybrid safety and a wide receiver who they made into a linebacker. He's one of the top tacklers in the country. And so they have those guys. And then Giovanni Biggers at safety is back. He's 6'1.5", 200. And then their star or their nickel is DeAndre Boykins, 5'11.5", 205, the better of the Boykins brothers. I think everybody knew that at the time of the recruitment. But that was the story for South Carolina's defense last year. Nick Emanwari, your leading tackler at safety, DQ Smith. Then down the line, other than Sherrod Green, you had a lot of secondary guys, and Jordan Birch, who everybody dismisses, even though no other defensive end in the Southeastern Conference had more tackles last year than Jordan Birch. A lot of Gamecock fans and a lot of people that have shows like mine don't think South Carolina's going to miss Jordan Birch. I kind of think they are. I mean, you hear Oregon's staff and Dan Lanning, who knows a little bit about defense, they're really talking up Jordan Birch. He was ranked as the number 4 transfer by The Athletic because he is 6'6", 290, and he was a 5-star guy. He was never going to be Jadeveon Clowney. But, man, he was really good. And, hell, he played both ways in the bowl game for South Carolina last year.
Yeah, I think I'm interested to watch those linebackers because I think they're solid. I think they're better than some of the pairs that South Carolina has marched out over the past few years, but I think vibe-wise they're a little bit similar where they're guys who do the job. I think scheme-wise both of them are pretty good pass rushers, but I'm not sure how much of that is because they themselves are naturally good pass rushers, and as much that, if you have a good scheme and inside linebacker blitzes, you can create some havoc. I'm interested to see them. As I said, I like Boykins for his toughness. I think he's a good hitter. I don't know that he's a stud coverage guy, but he's decent. And then, the thing that people will say, they'll say, well, Team X won't miss player Y. Well, some of that's a function of how good was player Y, and some of that's a function of who's left. And I think that in some ways, South Carolina is going to miss Jordan Birch and Gilbert Edmond, in part because those were good ball players. Also in part because the players they've brought in are solid ball players. I think a lot of those guys haven't proven that they have as high a ceiling and maybe have a floor that could be close to the production they got from those spots last year. But I don't really know. Like, that's more of it. You know, a lot of people want to say, well, you're not going to miss that guy. But that's only because the next guy, that's only because you don't know what the next guy looks like just yet. I mean, you know, there were a lot of unbelievable wide receivers that South Carolina through the years didn't miss all that much because a new unbelievable wide receiver showed up. You know, South Carolina wasn't destroyed because Alshon Jeffrey was gone. That doesn't mean Alshon Jeffrey wasn't a flat baller.
I mean, I agree. You know, you lost Ace Sanders, and then you got Pharaoh Cooper. You know,
you lost Pharaoh Cooper. You got Brian Edwards and Deebo Samuel. Also, we still historically underrate Pharaoh Cooper.
And Shi Smith.
So good.
Yeah, they were pretty good. So let's look at South Carolina. So the offensive line, I would have never conceived that there would be 3 transfer starters game 1. I still don't know that it will be, but it could be. It does look like either Sidney Fugar or Jackson Hughes are going to start at left tackle. Nick Gargiulo will be at one of the guards. Ja'Kai Moore will be at the other guard. We know Vershawn Lee is going to be the center. And then it's Kason Henry or Tyshawn Wanamaker. Tyshawn Wanamaker's played a lot of football at South Carolina. I still think it's possible Jackson Hughes could play one tackle and Sidney Fugar could play at the other tackle. But to me, it's kind of, and you don't know, right? Because of the gamesmanship. You don't know, well, we're just stacking it up this way, but this is not really the way it's going to be. You don't know who's really, once the media folks have been kicked out of practice, where guys have gone, right? Just like 2 years ago, DeCarrion Joyner in bowl practice before these two teams played the last time in Charlotte, every time the media was in there, he was lined up at wide receiver. And then as soon as they left, he put on a different color jersey and went to quarterback. And so I think we know what to expect from Juice Wells if he can play, from Amarian Brown, from Xavier Legette. Omega Blake, by all accounts, has had a great camp. Shane Beamer said they're still trying to work out who's 4, 5, and 6. I think, you know, it's going to be Eddie Lewis. It's going to be Elijah Caldwell. And I don't know, maybe it is one of those walk-on guys. Maybe it is Nicholas Harbor. Maybe they just play a bunch of tight ends. Because they can. And, you know, even with 3 wide receivers and a tight end, you can always motion DeCarrion Joyner out of the backfield because he's been a wide receiver. I mean, what are you expecting from Dowell Loggins offense? For me, I'm expecting tempo and kind of a bear raid kind of short, intermediate, and then pick your spots to take your deep shots?
I honestly don't know. I think just because of the NFL stuff, I think there's going to be a little more traditional power running than people expect. But I imagine a lot of it'll be in that context of pairing with some of that deeper stuff. I'll be interested to see if they do some of that bear raid, those read routes where the receiver basically reads the coverage. If your defensive back keeps backing up, they just break it off. If the defensive back stays up in their face, they just run by him. So I'll be interested to see just kind of that. I'm heading in with an open mind. Very intrigued to see what it is, because like it's hard to get a read on Chip Lindsey. And this is a guy who, like, not only has he run NFL offenses, he's run bad NFL offenses. And that makes it even harder to get a read on it because, it's clunky. It's not like you're watching a team that's got all of its pieces really in place. So I'm going to be interested in that. As you kind of said, that backup receiver, that's going to be a weird blend. Personally, I think it'd be very interesting if Omega Blake becomes a bit of a dude, because I'm a big believer in what I call talent activation, which is where you have a talented guy who doesn't get it for a while. And then when the coaching staff finally gets it to click, then that's something that gratifying is not the right word, but I always think those are fun stories. So I personally would think that would be very interesting. I'm a little less bullish on Nick Harbor just because I think playing wide receiver is really hard. And I think people if you're like a really good dyed-in-the-wool receiver, that transition can be a little easier because you're not in the middle of things. But if you're trying to like figure a lot of that out on the fly, and especially with the way that high schools can like ask less of kids, that I feel like the learning curve has gotten a lot steeper in those positions. I have distinct memories of I want to say it was the second McClendon year when they played App State and everyone was hurt, and they had a bunch of like talented young guys and just none of them played. Now some of them didn't turn out to be all that good, but it was like you just had a lot of guys that weren't really in that mix. So and then as you said about the offensive tackles, like if you'd said 3 transfers would start, I would have been surprised, only because one of them was a walk-on from Charlotte who was pretty up and down, and the other one, the spring reports were not so good about Fugar. But if they're confident enough to move Ja'Kai Moore inside full time, then that probably tells me something. Obviously, the last thing you want is a repeat of the offensive line element of the UNC opener in 2019, where they went in with a group and one game later had benched 2 people and moved someone else. But I'll be interested to see if Kason Henry plays at all. That's one that I'm kind of curious about. Like, I think Tyshawn Wanamaker, probably not the highest ceiling guy, but we've watched him play and he's played well. I mean, at times he hasn't been perfect, but he's been functional. And a lot of the time at offensive line, you need functional. Lord knows we've seen some not so functional situations. But yeah, with Loggins, I'm just kind of along for the ride on this one because it's a blank canvas and we're about to learn a lot about his personality as a play caller. And I think it'll be interesting, and I think it'll stay interesting.
All right. So as we start to wind it down here, give me your 3 keys to the game for South Carolina and then your prediction.
3 keys to the game. First key is someone in the South Carolina run game has to be able to do damage. Like, if this ends up being a game where Spencer Rattler has to throw 45 times, I wouldn't be the most excited for them, just because it means that there's an area that South Carolina could take advantage in that front 6, and South Carolina isn't capable of doing it. The second thing I would say is just being able to corral Drake May and take advantage of his miscues. Like, unless he's gotten a lot more consistent from last year, like there will be some sprays, there will be some missed passes that are open, and the way that you give those back, 2nd and 10, and then you have a missed tackle, or you miss a crosser, whatever, and you give up 15. So not allowing that kind of stuff to happen. So, not allowing him, he wasn't that big play of a runner last year, but like not allowing him to get loose for that. And then the last one, which I think as long as Spencer Rattler is around, almost every game I'm going to end up saying Spencer Rattler has to be consistent, good Spencer Rattler. Like, last year we saw the highs and last year we saw lows. He's so dang talented that a lot of the time he can let the other stuff kind of slip because he's so good. He's so physically good and believes so much in himself that he can do a lot, that he can get himself into trouble. So if he's throwing on the run in the right spaces and he's making those throws, I remember early in last year, there were a couple where he would throw on the run and he would just heave it over someone. And, a couple of games early could have changed if he had been a little more under control. So seeing that one. In terms of what do I expect from the game? It's a hard one to pick because there's so many unknowns. I think I'm picking South Carolina to win. I'm feeling like not a 3-point game, a little bit more, maybe 5. So maybe like a 38-33 kind of game. Don't ask me how UNC scores 33. I left math classes a long time ago, but that's kind of where my brain is. Just like not exactly a full-on shootout, but definitely like a higher scoring, get the blood pumping a little bit kind of game.
So that would definitely hit the over if anyone is placing one of the side bets on MyBookie.ag, which is the official online gaming sponsor of Gamecock Pod Live this year. I think there's like 140 different side bets you can make on a game in addition to just picking the line. And so I'm kind of with Brad Crawford here, who I had on last Wednesday. I think the wrong Carolina is favored. I think North Carolina is soft. I think from conversations with my good friend Brad Lawing, who has a couple of very good friends on that coaching staff that have worked with Mac Brown, they just feel that, late Texas era softness creeping in. I like South Carolina. I don't know why. Maybe I'm a homer, but I do think South Carolina cares more about defense. And I do think South Carolina is better in special teams than North Carolina. That's 2 of the 3 phases. And then you just hear about the relationship between Dowell Loggins and Spencer Rattler, and just how locked in he has been. It just feels like this is why Spencer Rattler and Juice Wells, even though, bless his heart, he may not play, this is why they came back, were for moments like these, moments like Tennessee and Clemson last year and at Kentucky. It is for the big games. And so I like South Carolina because I think they're the more physical team. And I mean, Gene Chizik was a national championship defensive coordinator for Mac Brown at Texas. Of course, they mostly won because they had Vince Young. I think a lot of people forget about that. It wasn't like the Big 12. You were having a lot of 14-9 games out there. But I like the Gamecocks. So tell us what you got coming up on the bigspur.com this week in your preview.
Well, I have a full breakdown of UNC. Actually, probably after this, I got to sit down and go through their depth chart and see if there's anything that last year's film didn't portray that camp has maybe changed up. We'll have that, I believe, Thursday, and then I'll have coverage from Bank of America Stadium, helping out. Gonna see all the old folks, figure some stuff out there, and we'll wrap up what for Gamecock fans, I imagine everyone hopes is a tidy victory with Dow Loggins' offense looking like everything that was promised.
Well, hopefully I will see you at the Carolina Rise tailgate, as I will be flying in to the Queen City on Saturday morning. Hopefully I'll be able to watch College Game Day on the plane and get in around noon and head over to the tailgate and get some of that good Nana's Porch, pimento cheese, and brisket and pulled pork. Should be good. So Ben, can't thank you enough for jumping on with us today, and hopefully I will see you on Saturday. So until then, be good, my friend, and we'll look forward to catching up with you down the road as always. Thank you. All right, that was my interview with Ben Breiner. All right, so that is going to be a wrap. Special thanks to MyBookie.ag, the exclusive online betting partner, sports betting partner of Gamecock Pod Live. Football is back, and so is winning time and winning season at MyBookie.ag. Whether it's NFL, college football, and a brand new cash out system to give you options to bet and win all season long. First two legs of your parlay hit, cash out early and use those funds to make another bet, or let it ride for the chance at a bigger play. I already told you guys the games that are in my parlay for this week. To get started, go to MyBookie.ag now and register for your free account. When you're ready to make your first deposit, just use the promo code GameCocks50 to grab a welcome bonus on the house. That's promo code Gamecocks50 to claim your deposit bonus, and for a limited time, a free chip to use in the MyBookie casino. You can bet anything, anytime, anywhere, only with MyBookie.ag, proud sponsor and exclusive online sports book for Gamecock Pod Live. All right, so that will be a wrap on today's show. Appreciate everybody watching live and in the chat box. Always good catching up with Craig and chopping it up there. We will be back tomorrow with Hale McGranahan, and then on Friday morning, it'll be the Fast Break Friday show with two-time Emmy winner Mike Uva. So for special guest Ben Breiner, this is Keith Alsep saying go Gamecocks. God bless our troops. And folks, let's keep everybody in the path of the storm in our thoughts and prayers. Until tomorrow, I'm out of here. I hope you guys have a great rest of the day.